It's what they can do. The challenge is finding one that specializes in the area that you want to get help in. So one of the groups that I'm part of as a financial advisor is called the XY Planning Network, and it's a firm. It's not a firm, actually. It's a company that helps fee-only independent firms launch their own, we call it registered investment advisory firm. And so XY Planning Network helps me launch my independent firm because they do a lot of the compliance and regulatory stuff that I don't know and I don't want to deal with. So I hire them, they do it for me. And then, now I can hang my shingle and I can serve clients because they helped. And so what I tend to look for and what they're big on is developing a niche because their thing is, great, you went through the CFP education, but now you know all the general stuff about the whole world of finance. And honestly, I didn't love all the CFP education. There was parts of it that fascinated me, like tax and investing, and some of the insurance stuff was actually pretty interesting on how to use it
Hmm.
and mitigate risk. But what I didn't learn much about real estate at all, like hardly any. And so I've had to go find all that education on my own. And fortunately, I have found some great networks and communities to be in for that. But I think if someone is looking to do something specific and they think perhaps like tax strategy, tax planning, or some type of investing, whether real estate or stocks, I think there's an advisor out there for everyone that has that niche and that expertise. But what I will say, just because you're a real estate investor, and I assume many of the people listening to this podcast probably invest in real estate, there's about 2,500 advisors in that XY network. There's about 10 to 15 of us that focus on real estate. It is such a small niche.
Hmm.
Actually, when I launched my firm, I did this awesome program through the VA, and they paired me up with a mentor. And my mentor was a financial advisor out of California. And what I told him that my niche was that I wanted to help people achieve financial independence through real estate investing. He was like, Dan, I got to be honest with you. That sounds great. That's a terrible idea as an advisor. He's like, real estate investors hate advisors. And he's like, they'll never put their money with you. They'll never, they always want to buy another property. They always want to do something else. And, they tend to be DIYers. And he's like, you're just not going to make it. And I was like, well, but that's why I'm fee only. So I don't sell them anything. And that's why I'm flat fee. So they just pay me for my service and I advise on all of it. And I can give tax planning strategy to them. And he was like, oh, well, that makes sense because they do tend to want advisors, but they don't want to give the advisors all their money to manage. And so, there's a niche for everything. So,
Hmm.
yeah, there's just as a maybe, I don't know if this is a funny example or not, so I won't say it is, but there's an advisor I know who works with female strippers. That's how specific she gets. And so anyone who wants to take their stripping tips and turn it into a retirement account, that's the girl to go to do that. So I think that there's a niche for everything. But again, if you're a consumer, I think you need to find the advisor that has the most expertise and experience in your niche, what you're trying to do. And then you've got to make sure that their fee structure makes sense with where you currently are and where you want to go. So that's a very long answer to that question.
So I'm glad to hear that there are specialists within,
Yep.
because while it's good to be a generalist, and know a little bit about a whole lot of things, or even a lot about quite a few
Mhm.
things, but to be able to specialize. I'm surprised though. I mean, I'm not surprised about the attitude uh, in real estate versus the stock market, because that's like a rivalry between Ohio State and Michigan. Uh,
Yep.
but uh,
We don't need to
to
talk.
say that it's a bad idea is interesting, because even if, I mean, literally in the title, an advisor, right? And it sounds like that person was coming from a broker uh, point of view, not going to buy what you advise them to buy, rather than that from them, rather than
Yeah.
Yeah, rather than simply taking advice on a proper course, right? The plan,
Yep.
not the product.
Yeah.
Anyways, so why did you choose real estate? To invest in, to advise them?
Honestly, because it's what I had become the most passionate about and what I wanted to learn about the most for myself. So maybe a little bit of a selfish motivation there, but I've learned so much and it's helped my own real estate investing. And then obviously I can add that value to my clients. But yeah, I got into real estate. I started learning about real estate when we were stationed at Germany. It was kind of funny. My car battery died at one point, and when I replaced the battery, the radio wouldn't turn on because I bought some old beater just to drive back and forth to work. And so the radio wouldn't work. And so I started listening to Bigger Pockets. And that was maybe back in like 2018 or 2017. And so I went from being, this sounds too good to be true, because I was always very conservative with my money. I was always an aggressive stock investor because I understood that and that made sense to me. But I was not as well versed with real estate. And, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, just like everyone else. It made sense, but he made it sound a little too good to be true, I thought. And I was just too conservative for that. Plus, I graduated from college in 2006, and we all know what happened or was starting to happen in 2006. And then when I joined the military in 2010, I'd met people who owned, 3 to 4 houses that were underwater on all of them, and they were struggling to get by. So I kind of had a bad taste in my mouth about real estate. And my philosophy was always, I will rent cheap and invest everything else. And so I went from being a skeptic to being like, this sounds pretty good, actually, to being like, this makes sense, to being like, man, I have to do this. Like, and part of what made sense to me that made me have to do it was the tax strategy piece. And so I was like, I need to keep learning as much about taxes as I can. And now becoming a financial planner, that actually opens doors into more courses and, more avenues to get like good official, tax education. And so, yeah, I just loved it. But that's what opened the door for me. So when we were in Germany, ironically, I was afraid of being a long distance landlord. So I was like, I'll wait till we move back to the States. And then we moved back to the States to Colorado. And I started looking around and I was like, well, I'm going to start looking in Ohio. So that's how I got to invest in Ohio. So I am a long distance landlord now.